Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mind Your Nest. I'm your host, Jennifer Rosen, and I'm so excited to have my guest in studio today. I've known her for a little bit, and she's really a trailblazer. Her name is Josie Machovec. Hi, Josie.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited.
Thank you for being here. I met you, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago.
Probably something like that. Yeah.
I was attending these Locals for Liberty events, and I found out about this group through the app Locals,
That's
which
right.
Dave Rubin started.
Yes.
Dave Rubin from the Rubin Report, he had always talked about getting involved locally in your community. And when I moved here, I was really interested in getting to know people in my neighborhood. So I went to these meetings, and that's how you and I connected. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously, the name of my podcast is Mind Your Nest. And as a former campaign manager, as well as a mother of three, minding your nest in a personal way of taking care of your family, your children, your personal bubble with you and your husband is an endeavor unto itself. And the duality of stepping in and saying, yes, I think I'm going to be a campaign manager. How does that come to be? Your kids, I think, are relatively young,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
How old are they?
So my kids are 6, almost 6, 8, and 10.
Okay.
Just turned 10. So yeah, they are relatively young, and they were even younger when I got into this world a little bit.
So talk to me a little bit about where you come from, how you got involved. What really was the impetus for you to really engage with not only your local community, but then wanting to expand that and become a campaign manager?
All right. So I've always been politically involved to some degree. My parents, my dad especially, has always been aware of politics, involved. They helped on campaigns. My mom took us to rallies when I was a kid. I saw George W. Bush a couple times, Bob Dole, Elizabeth Dole. So I grew up like just knowing that this is part of life, is to be involved in the governance of our communities, but always more on a national level. So I could tell you who the governor was. I could tell you who our congressmen were, and stuff like that. But I was not as much aware of the state and local government as I probably should have been up until COVID, essentially. And then when COVID started, I really realized how influential local government is on our day-to-day lives. So I have 3 kids, as we mentioned. At the time, they were all under the age of 5. And we lived in a 2-bedroom condo. And my husband all of a sudden had to work from home. We had nowhere to go. We had no backyard. We had no parks, no beaches, no stores, no schools, no places I could take my kids to do anything for months, essentially. Wow. And so I started going, okay, I just want to go to the playground where it's open and air. There's sunlight, there's air. I want my kids to go on the swings. We need to go do stuff. So I called the city and I was like, who do I talk to about getting the parks open? And they were like, oh, you have to call the county. The county closed the parks. And I was like, what do you mean the county closed the parks? Like the parks department? They were like, no, the county commissioners. I was like, okay, county commissioners. So I Googled Palm Beach County commissioners and I got all of their email addresses and I started sending emails saying, what do we need to do? What needs to happen in order for the parks to reopen? And I got an email back from my county commissioner. And
how long did the reply take?
He actually responded pretty quickly, okay. I will admit. Yeah, he was pretty responsive, so that gave me a lot of hope, thinking, oh my gosh, okay, he's responding. He sees my need. Right. As a good elected official, I'm going to go. And he invited me to come to the next county commission meeting and I get 3 minutes of public comment and I can watch local governance at work. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to go do this. And so I did. I rounded up some mom friends and we all went to this county commission meeting. And I have never been so disappointed in government and never been so disappointed in seeing people who have an influence in my life be so callous with it. Wow. And they sat there and they all argued with each other about articles in the Palm Beach Post about who was working while COVID was happening and who wasn't working and who was being lazy and who wasn't being lazy. And maybe we should let people go out on their boats, or maybe we should let people do the way they talked about our rights and our day-to-day lives was just shocking to me. I was like, we're all sitting here saying, excuse me, no, we get to tell you what we want to do. I'm an American. I'm a grown woman. My history. Right. Personally, I moved to Israel when I was 19. I joined the IDF. I spoke another language. I can decide if I want to take my children to the playground or not. You don't get to make that decision
right.
for
I'm
me.
not a child.
I'm not a child, exactly. And the way they were speaking about us as the constituents, like we were children, was just beyond shocking to me. Anyway.
I have a question.
Yes,
So were
shoot.
you picking up this while you were waiting to speak your 3 minutes? Were speaker after speaker was going before you, and this is what you were hearing?
Yeah, so I would listen to them. They all spoke with each other for a while, the county commissioners, and I would sit there and rewrite my speech. So I had written a speech, and then I listened to them, and I listened to other people speak, and some people said some of the things I wanted to say. So I was like, all right, well, I'll say something else so we could cover all our bases here. We collaborated a little bit. And yeah, I based a lot of my speech, that first speech, off of, I said to them, let me repeat to you what you just said. You're discussing letting people go out on their own boats in the marina that they pay for. I live in the city of Boca. I pay a lot of money in taxes. I pay to 2 different taxing districts to live in the city. I pay to the city and I pay to the beaches, greater beaches and parks district. But then I also, if I want to park at the beach or if I want to use the marina, I pay more in order to have permits to do those things. So people are paying and by the way, they didn't prorate any of these things. So I couldn't park at the beach and go to the beach in Boca that I paid a chunk of money for on top of my taxes. So the cities did this. The city didn't pay anything. The counties are saying we're going to let the people do these things. I'm like, excuse me, who are you? What do you think you have so much control over my life?
Exactly.
And it really showed me how much control they do have. And so I proceeded to attend every county commission meeting from that point on till about 4 or 5 months. A lot of people in my community knew I was doing that. So I was getting calls from parents constantly. When are we getting the parks open? When are we getting the parks open? It really started with the parks. If they would have opened the parks back in April 2020, I don't know that I would be sitting here right now because it just really lit a fire under my tush.
Josie, really.
It was my nest. They invaded my nest.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
How often are these meetings held? I know a little bit about when the public meetings are held and when you can go. I think I went to a couple before I moved here. And then I think I've gone to a couple here in Florida. But can you just describe how often residents in their own community have the opportunity to speak?
Sure. At these meetings?
Yes.
Sure. It depends on where you live. If you live, actually, kind of. There's two ways to do it. If you live in a municipality, so if you live in a city, and you know that even if your address says Delray Beach, but you don't pay taxes to Delray Beach, meaning you live in greater Delray Beach, or you live in the county, unincorporated part of Delray, unincorporated part of Boca, then your government, your direct government, if you're in the unincorporated, is the county government.
Got it.
If you live in a city, if you live in the city, so you pay taxes to the city of Boca, to Delray Beach, Boynton Beach, whatever it may be, then your direct government is your city council or your city commission. That doesn't mean you don't get to address the county commission as well, because again, in that instance, for example, going back to the parks, the city had abdicated their authority over the parks and given it to the county. So when I would call the city, they would say we closed the parks under order of the county. The city could have pushed back and said, no, we don't want to close our parks. We pay for our parks, but they didn't have the cojones to do that.
That's a good word.
And we know that because that was a whole conversation and argument between the county commissioners and some of the Boca City Council members back in the day.
Wow.
So the county commissioners looked at Boca and said, you guys asked us to close the parks. Our mayor went to them and said, can you please close our parks?
Oh my gosh.
So if you want to address your county commission or your city council, both of them, all meetings are open to the public. You can attend the meeting, or most of them are also streamed online. Okay. If you are going to speak about an agenda item, so this is where I recommend people to really get involved in their local community, is to all agendas are posted for all meetings. So I live in the city of Boca, like I said. So I actually get a text message with a link to the agendas. I've signed up for the city text. So whenever the agendas are available, I can click on the link and I can read through all of the agendas. So if you would like to make a public comment and speak to an issue on the agenda, you're allowed to do that. You just have to stick to the agenda item.
Got it.
Most, if not all, I believe, public meetings also allow for what's called matters by the public, where you're allowed to, where they have certain times allotted for 3 minutes or whatever it may be for you to come and speak about whatever business you have or whatever you want to talk about. So it doesn't have to relate directly to an agenda.
Got it. Okay, so it could be a more general topic or something.
You can come in and be like, I'm seeing this as an issue here in my community. Can you do something about it? Or you say, here's an idea, whatever it is, a grievance. It's an opportunity for you to redress your grievances against your government, against your local government.
I think,
or to your local government.
I think that we had done something where we attended that in Boynton Beach. I think when the campaign started.
It's very possible.
Which I thought was incredibly interesting.
It is.
When you see it on TV or when you read about it or you just see the process live in an...
I highly recommend everybody take an opportunity to go watch. Again, if you live in a city, go to your city one or go to both. Go to the county and compare and contrast and see how do they operate, how do they do things. All of them do follow like similar processes.
Right.
They have agendas. They follow their agendas. There's Robert's Rules of Order. So they run meetings like in an orderly manner, which is for the benefit of everyone in the meeting. And it also communicates to your elected officials that you're watching them.
Right.
When they see, when they look out in the audience and they see people out there, they know that they're being watched. And that's good because part of our job is not just to elect good people to governance, but it's also to hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do. If they say they're going to do something during their campaign and then they don't do it, honestly, that's on us.
Yeah.
Because we didn't hold their feet to the fire. We just elected them and said, I trust this person. Sorry. A lot of people are not trustworthy. And I am not speaking to anyone directly as an elected. I'm just saying it's easy for them to lose sight of what the people want.
I do find that's why I've always been somewhat cynical about the whole process, about from the federal, then to your state, and then to your local government. And I would venture to say that there are other people that have that same feeling too. It's so crazy and it's such a mess that you really don't believe that your voice or your energy that you put forth towards something that you find is a disparagement against how you want to live your life is worth the energy to just go and attend a meeting and speak up. I also think that the format that these meetings are held in, like I said, they all look the same. And it's the people that you are speaking to are elevated up. They're like higher up
on the dais
than you. Yeah. And I find that fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's not, I think there's two reasons to it. If you go sit in chambers in any of these rooms, it's helpful because you can actually see the people that are speaking. But it is an interesting position when you're standing there giving a speech and you're having to look up at them.
Yes.
And it actually brings me back to like how I got into campaign management. So I did that for months. I would go, I would speak, whatever they were talking about. I would focus on when are we getting the parks open? And I would come and bring evidence and research and data and stuff like that. And so,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to ask, so you started this one day, you decided, that's it, I'm going to start speaking. Did you notice that there were more people attending as time went on, number one? And then number two, you must have felt like some push, some inertia to help you continue to move forward with this wanting answers.
Yeah. So the answer to the first question is there was a group of people that I met, either that I knew beforehand that I gathered when we all went to go to this meeting, the first one. And then there were people that I met at the meeting who they had the same like kind of feeling that I had, the same like reason for being there. Like something is going on. You need like, here are some, we were going in with data. We were going in with real factual information. Not just, and this is a not controversial thing. In hindsight, a lot of people look at COVID and be like, oh, we didn't know what we didn't know. But there were people who knew.
Yes.
And I was one of those people.
Yep.
And not because I'm smarter than anyone else, just because I'm highly skeptical. That's
yes,
really
which is, I think that is really such an underrated characteristic in people.
Yeah. And so I was highly skeptical of what I was being told. And so it forced me to go into more research, which I then brought, and I was like, look, we're not trying to start a revolution here. We just want you to hear us.
Yep.
And they literally would say, thank you for your comment. And that was it. And
which I have to say, when I've seen with my own two eyes, the whole process, listening to a speaker, your time's up, the gavel comes down and everything. And the speaker, the resident, is coming with such passion and emotion. And you could tell that they really did their research, their due diligence, that they're extraordinarily frustrated. And then to be met with this, I don't know, this like standard corporate response is so unnerving. It's so disrespectful.
It's so disrespectful, but they're met with a lack of care.
Yes.
Lack of care. Like they did not care what I said. They did not care about my story. They did not care that we snuck onto a playground because we found one that didn't have tape around it, and we went to go on the swings, and my son hadn't been in a swing for so long that he cried. He was terrified of being in the swing.
It is
and
bananas.
I would tell them the story. I'm like, this is what you're doing to children. And they would just say, thank you for your comment.
Yeah.
That was it. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then the masks started, and that turned into, that was insane. So to answer your question too about more and more people, no. And that was very disappointing. At the meeting where they mandated masks in Palm Beach County, they had 50 speakers that were against, and that was it. And then, I don't know, a few months later, I don't know, maybe it was 6 to 8 months later, I went to a Republican meeting, and the guy got up there and he was like, we live in the room is packed. There's 500 people in this room, right? And he says, we live in a blue county, and therefore they've mandated masks. Everyone's booing and everyone's upset. And I looked around the room and I was like, none of you were at the meeting where they mandated masks. If maybe another 10% of you would have showed up, maybe we wouldn't be doing this right now. But it really showed me that so to answer the question is, did more and more people come? Unfortunately, no. I think people were so terrified of whether or not they were terrified of COVID, or they were terrified of the government, or whatever they were terrified of. It really went into the same group of people that were just there constantly. And we did get the needle moved a little bit. We finally got the parks reopened. The parks opened in August of that year.
Oh my gosh.
So August. They closed in March, and they didn't open again until August. And they only opened because we finally got hold of someone in the governor's office who then put the squeeze on the county. That was the only reason they opened. They didn't open because of us. I don't know how long they would have tried to keep the parks closed. It was crazy. I don't think about that time too often, but every once in a while I go back for whatever reason. It pops up on my feed on Facebook or whatever. I'll go down this rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, it was insane what we lived through.
Yeah. So I'm sure it riles you up and brings you back to a time where you're like, what is going on here?
What is happening?
Are we living in outer space?
Yeah.
What is going
what is happening? And why cannot more people see what is going on? Whatever's going on. I can't put my finger on it, but why can't more people see it?
You did touch on something, and I wanted to ask you because I felt a similar way. And I don't know, I'm pretty skeptical towards, I don't know, what Dave Smith says, the corporate press.
The corporate press.
Yeah, that's how he describes them. And I never really believed everything that I read or saw or heard or whatever. I was never really like a huge news junkie to begin with, although I will admit to watching 60 Minutes every week. I don't know, for some reason.
I was 60 Minutes.
Yeah,
they had some interesting stories.
Yes. But when all this craziness started, it didn't really change my behaviors. I just was like, really? What's going on? Something doesn't seem right. I'm not really sure. And I went to places where I was starting to get my news, which was not turning on the channel and going to a certain station. How did you start research? Did you know resources that you wanted to tap into that would help you along this journey?
So that's a great question. Right before COVID started, the backup to that got me into it was childhood vaccines. So my parents were hippies. So I was raised with a healthy skepticism of the medical industry, and which included the childhood vaccine schedule. And so at the time, my kids had religious exemption for them to be able to attend school and things like that. And me choose the vaccine schedule that I wanted to give them and not have to follow what the government mandated. And across the country, starting in about 2015, 2016, states started removing religious exemptions. So it started in California. It happened in New York. It happened in West Virginia. Mississippi already didn't have them for a very long time. And then New Jersey was a really big one. It was in 2019. They tried to do it. And I watched online streaming of people on the ground there. A cousin who lived up there who was keeping me updated. And 4,000 or 5,000 people showed up at the state capitol to fight against them removing the religious exemption in New Jersey. So I'm all watching all of this happening across the country. And then I get word that a bill was filed here in Florida to remove our religious exemption. Wow. So it didn't go anywhere, thankfully. It was just filed by a senator who's thankfully no longer a senator, and a state senator. And so I was already tapped into kind of this more alternative medical world a little bit, a more holistic medical world. So there are definitely some great podcasts that I was listening to with reporters. One of them was The High Wire with Del Bigtree. There was Robert Scott Bell, who neither of them are on YouTube anymore because they both got yanked not too long after that. But that's where I was watching them at the time. They all have their own streaming now. And so and then through them, they were all different resources. Everyone was RFK Jr.'s the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yes. But I was already following him for a very long time because he was involved in that fight. He was in New Jersey at the state capitol, rallying people to fight against the removal of the exemptions. And I was following a lot of what he was doing, the Children's Health Defense Network. And so there was a whole movie called Vaxxed, which is Dr. Robert Wakefield, which is really great.
Where is that?
So I think you have to go on Vaxxed online. I think you can stream it from their website. And then they have another sequel, which is the 1986, The Act, which was the removal of an act that was done by Congress, signed by Ronald Reagan under duress, but it was signed and it was to remove liability, is the word, for vaccine manufacturers. So again, during COVID, it was a big contested, a big thing was like, oh my gosh, the COVID vaccine, they don't have any liability. Right. Little known fact, they have no liability for anything. Yep. So if a child gets injured from a vaccine, which does happen, if it didn't happen, they wouldn't have an insert a mile long with all of the potential adverse effects. Then if your child gets injured by a vaccine and you can prove it, you don't get any compensation. You cannot sue the manufacturer. You have to go to the U.S. government, and the U.S. government takes money out of our tax dollars to defend itself against your lawsuit. And then if you somehow win, there's a maximum payout that's like $250,000.
It's so maddening.
It's insane. This is a whole subject that
yes, I know
that I could go on for, but it's really insane that people don't know that you are, like, just in general. I mean, if you get injured in a car accident, you can sue whoever you want. If your child gets an injury, if you get an injury, if you go to the hospital and they give you the flu shot and you have an adverse reaction to it, sorry, you can't sue the doctor, you can't sue the nurse, you can't sue the manufacturer, you can sue no one.
Yeah, it's so bananas.
Bananas exactly.
And there's and what I have come to understand, and then I want to move on a little bit, is that there is really no logic and reason to a lot of things that have happened over the past several years. And I do find that, like we just talked about, I get a little charged up deep inside somewhere when you recall the events of the past couple of years.
It's traumatic. It was very traumatic.
Yeah. And everybody had a different experience with it, regardless of where you lived or if you were single, if you had kids or whatever. Correct. We all have our stories. I wanted to turn into how you took all of this, and I've learned a tremendous amount from you in a very short amount of time.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And really, you have some incredible wisdom and real life experience based on how you were raised, which I think is fantastic. So with all of these experiences, and did you feel that you were getting more and more involved from a political aspect? And then with that, what did you decide you wanted to do with it?
Yeah. So what happened was I had a speech that I gave at the county commission that someone else reposted, and it went uber viral.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So but my name was not attached to it, which I was super good with, because I was already getting like nasty stuff in the mail. Like there was a lot that was going on. All right. I was already getting hate calls. Like I was like, I don't need any more.
Right.
But with that, I started getting from people who knew who I was, I started getting some, hey, you should run for office. You should run for office. And I was like, I'm not running for office. That's insane. I'm not doing that. That sounds like a crazy thing to do. I have 3 young kids. I have no money. I have no idea what I'm doing. Why would I do that? And I kept getting it from someone who I trusted. And so I met with a couple people. And I just started to think about it. I started to pray about it. I started to talk to my husband, my parents, who I really trust. And it was the deadline. So the idea was to run for city council in Boca. And there was a seat that someone was running unopposed. And so that was a big thing for me, too. As I started looking at these county commissioners and these city council members, I started to see how many of them ran unopposed and got elected with no contestation. And And so I stood in front of them at this was a different meeting, a different speech, but I do remember this distinctively. I said to them, we know who you are now. You've woken the majority, you've woken the parents
Yeah.
and the people that are not going to put up with this, and we're never going to let you run unopposed again. And so I said that. My husband saw the speech later. He goes, uh-oh, you can't say
Watch
that. And
out.
then you're going to run for office one day. I was like, I'm not running for office. He's like, you better get ready. I was like, oh my gosh. So that
You
was
set
playing.
the table.
I did. And it was not the point. It was just to let them know. And anyway, so I said that. And
sometimes you say those things and it just comes out and you're like, oh, maybe I want to retract, and then
too late. Goes on public record.
You're like, sorry.
Yeah,
that's
for the record. Also, when you speak at a public meeting, it's on public record.
Yeah.
There's a transcript of it. There's video. They can't legally take it down. You are out there, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, you can't be like, can we re-record
Yeah,
this?
no, there's no re-recording. It is out there forever.
Yeah.
Literally becomes part of the public record. There was somebody running unopposed in the city council, and then there was someone else running. There was a couple other people running, but anyway, long story short, I decided to jump in the race. Last minute, you had to have your paperwork filed by 5:00 on the Friday, and mine was stamped at 4:45.
Excellent.
No one knew that I was running. Nobody knew who I was. I just jumped in. I called a friend of mine and I told her what I was thinking. And she's like, you should do it. And I was like, you have to be my campaign manager. She's like, I've never been one. I said, I've never run for office. So here we are. I jumped in. It was a very weird time because this was early 2021. Everything was online. The city council meetings were all online. There was no community meetings. There was no places for me to go to meet people. So it was door knocking was very nerve wracking because people were like, why is this person coming to my door? It's like during COVID, nobody comes to the door. And so it was a very weird time, but it was a crazy experience. And so I sent this email out and I got an email back. I sent an email to all the registered Republicans in Boca, and I get this email back with this guy asking me all these questions. I was like, all right, I'll answer anybody's questions. Sure. I answer all the questions. I guess I passed the test. So he emails me back and he goes, okay, we'd like to invite you to this meeting. And I was like, okay, great. Because I haven't been able to go to any meetings. This sounds great. It's in a room above a brewery. And I was like, okay,
gosh.
it's like a tongue tavern. What is this? So I go in. It was Locals for Liberty. And it was their second or third meeting. They were sitting at this big table. Everyone's hushed because we're not supposed to be meeting still. But we were all but there was no rules against it. It was just socially unacceptable still at the time. And so I go in, I give my little spiel about the city and what I'm going to do for the city. And I have this guy raise his hand. He's like, what do you think of masks? And I was like, wait, oh, that's a loaded question. How do I answer this? And so I was like, you can Google my name and that'll tell you everything I think about masks. Because at that point I was in the newspaper. There was a lot of stuff on my name. And then they were like, yeah, us too. And so everyone was like, rrr, rrr. So they were like my people. I was like, these are my people. These are my people. And
Where have you been?
Where have you been? And I met them. And in that room was Michael and Marcy Woodward. And so I became friends with them. They lived not too far from us. And they helped a little bit out with my campaign. And we became friendly. I kept going. So I lost, obviously, that race. But I did get 1,100 votes.
That's great.
Which was amazing because I was like, 1,100 people in the city voted for me. I knocked on this one lady's door and she's, oh, yeah, I know who you are. I already voted for you. I was like, what?
Thank you.
Thank you. I was like, this is crazy. And anyway, so I'll fast forward a little bit. So I kept in touch with, I kept going. I stayed involved. I started getting more and more involved in just what local government looked like, what it all meant, how to stay in touch with everything. And Marcy decided that she was going to run for county commissioner, which thank God, because the guy she ran against was running unopposed.
Right.
And I kept having that, going back to that speech in my head of, you will never run unopposed again. And he was my commissioner. And my husband was like, you're going to have to run against him. I was like, I'm not ready. I don't know. I don't know. Freaking out. Marcy calls me. She's like, I think I'm going to run. Thinking about running. So we called a meeting and she's like, I'm going to do it. And I was like, all right, what do you need? She said, I need a campaign manager. And I was like, I've only run one campaign, but I'll do my best. And she said, let's go. And we had 6 months, she raised about $40,000 and she won by 5 points.
That's amazing.
And it was incredible. And from there, I've just continued. I worked on a smaller municipal campaign and then I joined Bill's campaign about a year ago. Actually, it was December of last year when I joined his campaign. And my background is sales, customer service, marketing, that type of thing. And campaigning is just marketing a person rather than a product.
You're right.
That's what I focus. I transfer a lot of those skills. And it's given me an opportunity to meet people more. I knew you, but get to know you better, get to know people better, and just stay involved in what's going on in our community.
And how would you say that things have evolved over time? Now we're at the end of 2024, obviously with a new administration coming in. You and I have talked many times about just the insanity that has been going on in the world. And I still have such difficulty absorbing all of the vitriol and the anger and I don't know, some people being out of their skis about what's going on in the
Hmm.
world. And every time I feel like that, I have to remind myself just stay in your little bubble, stay in your nest, like locally, like what's
Hmm.
going on here in my community. And and that matters more than what's going
Hmm.
on in Washington, D.C., because it was never that much of a priority in my life beforehand. So now, why is it the first and last thing that we're supposed to think about every single solitary day?
Right.
And I don't do that. How would you say that with the state of the world today? What are your thoughts on that?
So, yeah, I have a lot more optimism now.
Hmm.
I'm still skeptical. I'm still going to watch, but
Yeah.
I think it's very important that we, meaning the collective we, do not go back to a place of complacency and
Hmm.
only being distracted by what's happening in DC and to stay involved in our communities. And that can be everything from going to council meetings, commission meetings, to participating in community things. And I think when you start doing that, it will help you. It helps to keep you grounded because then you can be involved in the day-to-day aspect of building your community around you.
Yep.
I've always been raised, like my parents raised us, with very, very community minded in both our religious world, and I was homeschooled, so I had a very tight, small group of homeschool community and just being of service to those around you. So what does that look like? It can look like serving on boards. So a lot of people don't know that there are tons of boards in cities and in commissions. So I serve on 2 boards right now, and they're appointed by either the city council members or the city commission members. And a lot of times they have vacancies. People
Yep.
don't know. They're like anything from the library board, which is less complicated ones, to more complicated ones, which is like planning and zoning. And so I sit on the Solid Waste Authority Citizens Advisory
Mm.
Committee for the county. And I also sit on the advisory committee for women for the county.
It's amazing.
I strongly encourage people, if you would like to get involved and stay connected to building a better future for your community, your nest, so to speak, is to see if you can find a board to be involved on. Because I think that will help us stay connected and not get distracted by all the things that are happening in DC. And it's good to know what's going on. And like my husband and I are a bit of news junkies.
Yep.
And we'd like to news each other. And so we do know, don't let it go. But what helps to keep me grounded, or to help when I encourage people to stay grounded, is to stay focused on what we can control.
Hmm. Yep.
And that's our space right around us.
That's exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with that. So talk to me a little bit about We the Locals.
We
I
the
love this.
Locals. Okay, so this was like a passion project.
Mhm.
We would have these, as you talked about in the Locals for Liberty meetings, we would sit and we would talk, and everyone would it was an opportunity, especially in the early days of 21, 22, to really have an opportunity for, I hate to use the word safe space because it sounds so,
Yeah, I don't like that either.
I don't either, but that's the way I had to describe it to some degree. Of people like have come to have like-minded conversation.
Mhm.
A lot of people, if they're in a job or in a world where they don't get to talk about what's really going on in their mind, to have a place to do that. So we would start doing that, and we would finish like some of the conversations, be like, man, we should start a podcast. Like, we should start
That's
a
great.
podcast. We should start a podcast. And so one day we were like, no, we really should start a podcast. If we don't start the podcast, it's not going to start.
Uh-huh.
Me and a couple of other ladies that were heavily involved in locals, Abby Stafford and Jessica Jansen, and we got together one night. So we started having meetings, and we were like, what are we going to call it? Like locals, and We the Locals. And we're going to focus. So we created our rules and our parameters of focusing on what's happening in our cities and our county and our state. And that's it. DC, we briefly touch on topics every once in a while. We'll talk about presidential elections if there's something important, or maybe touch briefly on some congressional things or states or Senate things. And then we were like, all right, and now we're going to bring it home.
Yep.
And we're going to bring it back to what's happening locally. So we have on candidates and sitting government officials. We've had on county commissioners. We've had on, recently, it was such a fun conversation. We had Steve Abrams, who was a former Boca City councilman, Boca City mayor, and then he became county commissioner for our district here in Boca and in Boca. And it was such a fascinating conversation with him because he had a real big influence on a lot of the atmosphere that we see in the city of Boca, as well as even in the county. So he created the position of mayor in the county. We don't have a mayor where they get elected, what's called a strong mayor, which is in any city or local governance system. what they have either what's called a strong mayor system or where it's a city manager style system. So a strong mayor is someone is basically the CEO of the city.
Got it.
And they're an elected official. Or if you have a city manager position, then the mayor is a little bit more, they're still an elected position, but they don't have the power and the authority to run the city the way that they hire a city manager to run it. And they're the CEO. Anyway, he created a mayoral position for Palm Beach County because a lot of like other states officials wouldn't meet with the county commissioners. They would meet with the mayor of West Palm instead of the mayor of Palm Beach County. And so he was like, no, Palm Beach County needs to be recognized as a whole, and South County needs to get some of the love because everything was happening in West Palm because of the way that the titles would work. People didn't understand our structure of government down here. And so like CEOs and a lot of businesses they're trying to bring to Palm Beach County, they wanted to meet with the mayor of the county. So he created, so some of the structure of the government that we see today, he had an influence in. So it was a very fascinating conversation. Anyway, yeah, so that's what we do. And we the locals, and we talk about local politics. We talk about local events. We talk about local everything. We talk about party issues, Republican Party things going on, good, bad, and ugly.
Yep.
All kinds of stuff. It's so much fun.
Yeah, you get knee deep into the dirt of stuff.
We try not to get too intense, but we do.
No,
it's fun.
I've watched, and it's I think it's a very realistic and practical podcast that really, for the layman, you know,
that's our goal, is to try to educate people and give people an opportunity to be able to know how they can be involved and what the issues are, because not everyone has time to sit and read through everything, every agenda, everything. But if we can condense that and put it into a podcast that is also entertaining, where you want to listen to us yammer on and crack jokes
and giggle.
I'm there for the comic relief. I just like to bring the jokes, but I'm kidding.
No, but you are. But the thing is that we don't have to be serious all the time.
No,
about
we're
everything
fun.
that's going on. I think that's one of the things that I've definitely loosened my belt on. We're here on this planet. We get one chance around the sun. Let's make it the best experience we possibly can. If you want to live in the sunshine state, then come on down. I'm so grateful.
Oh, we're full. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm so grateful that I decided to move here.
I'm so glad too, by the way.
I do have to say that, I don't know, I think it's interesting. The people that I've run into since I've moved here seem to be so engaged in what's going on in Florida. You know, from a political perspective, they want to get to know people who are pulling the strings a little bit. And then you have the other side of people that just want to come here on vacation and drink your margaritas and go to
lay on the beach.
Yeah, which is fine too.
Which I want to do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because you can't just put all of your eggs in one basket and just say, all right, this is my whole life. My whole life is going to surround myself with this. After Bill's election didn't go the way that he wanted, life does go on. The sun
still going to go down and come up.
That's exactly right. So we just have to take a breath.
Yep.
And be grateful for having.
It was a great experience.
Yeah,
we learned a lot.
I think so too. And
met some people. Yeah, exactly. Met some incredible people. Got you know, I personally, just as far as like from professional standpoint of campaign management and stuff, I learned a lot and learned from some mistakes, learned from some wins.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience. I'm very thankful for it.
One of the things that I want to say in closing is, you and I had talked about a little bit at the end of the campaign, was making connections with people. I don't know how best to describe this other than to say who think differently than I. Volunteers, when I was volunteering, and I would really make friends with people that were standing on the other side with other signs. And it was really lovely.
Yes, I do think that, there was that. There was a lot of opportunity for that in this campaign, was to really to show that we're not like what they think we are, and they're not what we might think they are.
Exactly. Like we're human. We all want the same things. We want to live under a roof, be able to have food on our
have a good future for
refrigerator.
Our kids.
Exactly. Yeah. And get out and turn the TV off and, I don't know, go.
Put X down.
Yeah. And
that's my challenge.
Yeah. And thank God I don't go on that. All right, Josie. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This is a great time.
I hope maybe we'll see each other on another campaign. Who knows? Sure. We're not quite sure.
We'll see. Who knows what the future holds?
Yeah, I know. I hope you have a wonderful end of the year and happy holidays.
Thank you.
And everybody, you know the drill. Thank you so much for coming along for the ride. And don't forget to mind your nest.